Hi everyone, welcome to AGS Academy for UPSC and PCS. This video is for PSIR or Political Science and International Relations of WPT for IS PCS Mains Exams 2022. And this elaborate political philosophy, what we are going to discuss today about John Locke, will be quite useful for the aspirants of civil services, and this video is also useful for UGC, NET, GRF, SET or SLET 2021 and also for 2022 exams. Regarding UGC, NET and GRF, that's going to be held as per the announcement what we are getting the news about. Soon it's likely to be held end of this month. If it went as per schedule, and then it covers a lot about like Western political thought, part of political science and international relations, quite useful for them. And I'm pretty sure this video tremendously could be useful for those who tries to understand and who basically tries to find out about John Locke as a part of political thought. Dear friends, in this video, as a part of series under Western political thought, all UPSC's men's videos we are covering, and also for UGC GRF net, it will be covered here one by one in different series of this AGS Academy. And it not only that, this video is also quite useful for college and university students of Western political thought right across the country or wherever they want to learn, they want to know about like exactly what is under John Locke's of 1632 to 1704. And this is part 1 under the banner of AGS Academy, and particularly optional of IS Mains and useful also for PCS state level exams. Let's try to find the introductory part of this video, what it talks about. And so we'll start first about introduction part, and then we'll move accordingly what could be the better next part, like natural law and natural rights, or natural law of John Locke. That's again very, very important. So dear friends, as you saw about like what we just trying to figure out in this video, which will be covering under political science PSIR, will be like how optional WPT is in its GRF that will be taken care of, and then and how it could be useful for multivarious purposes, not only IS, PCS, also for UC NET GRF, and then for colleges and university studies purposes for those students who try to find out, who try to understand actually the concepts and political thoughts of John Locke. For those who are new to this video, must be informed, we are covering series of videos under Western political thought, and previously we had covered about Thomas Hobbes and Law. And before this, in Thomas Hobbes, we had covered 3 parts of that of the series. And under this, we are talking today in part 1. As I said, like first part will be introductory part, then we'll be covering further about like natural rights and natural law. Let's see like what John Locke's political philosophy could be. As an introductory part, we can find out. Dear friends, John Locke was one of the most influential political philosopher of that era, and that was so important in the post Thomas Hobbes, when the world witnessed about Thomas Hobbes' theory, state of nature, and various components of Leviathan part, and there were a lot of debates and discussions as to how the submission of the parts, as to how the rights of an individual or all individuals need to be surrendered before the authority in the form of commonwealth. But in case of John Locke's political philosophy, what we are going to discuss today in this connection, being one of the most influential political philosophers, he categorically talks about and discusses in his two treatises of government that is so famous, and he defends about the claim, actually when he talks about the free nature, the freedom, the liberty of human beings, and that against God's claim, which God had made all people naturally, talk about like subject to a monarch. In this connection, John Locke is slightly liberal, and he also attaches a lot of values as as per my understanding about, he attaches the value in the sense to the incarnation, and on that basis he talks about incarnation also plays important role in the nature of man or human beings, and that's significant. Dear friends, John Locke's political philosophy also discusses about various rights, and like the right to liberty, right to life, and property. And these three rights are considered to be a foundation and foundational independent of the laws in any society, and every society has to insist and take care about these rights that are so essential, on the basis of which human beings survive. The lives of human beings will not be possible unless any government whatsoever in the power gives and attaches the rights of these people, and in the form of life, liberty, and property, and that cannot be taken come what may in any situation. What the gist need likely to come, or is likely in the form of what like uh, Locke's political philosophy talks about in the two treatises of government. Dear friends, John Locke's claim and counterclaims, and he talks about free and equal, naturally free. That's something very decisive and important. That's also a kind of justification to understand any government of the day or a legitimate political government of that particular time, which was based and which was the product of a social contract. Dear friends, now it's very clear, those who are following our videos under AGS IS Academy banner, which we had discussed in the previous Leviathan of Thomas Hobbes, very categorically discussed about social contract and the powers extended by the public to the next part, and that was Commonwealth. Dear friends, here also people, according to John Locke's political philosophy, state of nature basically is conditional transformation of some of the rights in a way so that public can live in peace and harmony, so that it was essential how best public's rights can be taken into consideration, so that they don't become the victim of antisocial elements of the society. Dear friends, something which we saw contrary to the facts prevailing in that society were like Thomas Hobbes discussed, that was a straight war against all, while nobody was in peace, but the same cannot be derived and talked about those features in the theory of John Locke's political philosophy. Needless to add, we all know about like John Locke is considered to be the father of liberalism, which we'll definitely discuss in due course of time. Dear friends, if the question comes, say for example, from UPSC's point of view, ISMAN's 2022 under political thought, if the question is framed like shed light on John Locke's political philosophy of natural rights and natural law, and explain your answer with the suitable examples. In that sense, the answer can be narrated or can be written in the form of what you all need to do is you first start with introductory part if the question is of long marks, say for example 15 marks or 20 marks, then give brief introduction of first John Locke's political philosophy. Dear friends, so we're talking about it was not like state of nature what like Thomas Hobbes used to talk about. It's different in John Locke's political philosophy. Yes, of course, social contract is the product of the agreement between two parties, and the government is a resultant factor of that. And therefore, by virtue of that, both the parties enjoy certain rights, but particularly the society, the people, on the behalf of the legitimate political government. And by rendering all rights to the political legitimate government, according to John Locke's political philosophy, talks about, in this sense, the public should feel free, stable, comfortable, and enjoy their rights of life, liberties, properties, values, traditions. These are the situations on the basis of which the government can really take care of the public. Thomas Hobbes, if we talk about, he was in an extreme position when he compared John Locke's introductory part with Leviathan. He was in no way, in general discourse, allowing public to revolt against the existing government of that time. When we study about like Thomas Hobbes of Western political thought, but to a far extent, John Locke talks about the perception, the understanding, the values, the traditions of the society were almost like congenial, cannot be said to be confrontationist as used to happen in the state of nature of Thomas Hobbes. Dear friends, it means aspirants of ISMANs can also able to handle the question. If the nature of the question is like, make a comparative study of the state of nature of John Locke's political philosophy with the philosophy of Thomas Hobbes. In this sense, the answer not only can be compared about Leviathan, and various components of that with suitable examples. A parallel can also be drawn with John Locke's political philosophy vis-a-vis Thomas Hobbes. While the extremist position of Thomas Hobbes can be portrayed, in case of John Locke, a slight version of leniency regarding the state of nature appears to be on the right track. And of course, that can be explained with the help of suitable examples as per the requirements of the question being asked. Dear friends, needless to add, in case of John Locke's political philosophy, definitely the governments basically exist with the consent of the demography or the public across the spectrum of the society. And the government was not there not for simply to defend the government from all accounts, but the government was meant for the protection of the people. And that was a condition based on social contract between the two parties. This is what being narrated. Dear friends, in order to protect the rights of the people and also to promote the public good, the government, it is essential, has to ensure and protect the very objectives of the electorate, what we call in modern society, the very perception, the very welfare of the public for what the social contract was established. Dear friends, it was that time which it took place of John Locke's era. But let's imagine and make a comparative study of that era vis-a-vis of today's contemporary globalized world. If a comparative and parallel studies are being asked to draw of that epoch with the current one, what should be done? John Locke's political philosophy's state of nature, or his ideas, thinkings, perceptions, definitely have much more relevant and can be drawn parallel of today's globalized world. If there is a pervasive globalization across the world, somewhere down the line, there is a sense of freedom for the individuals of any country or for the public to decide about those components which could be useful for the public, where they can have free play, not being constant and forced anything by the regime of any country. Dear friends, everywhere in today's world, from ASEAN to Middle East to Europe to North America to Central Asia to South Asia, the consent of the public is a must for the ruler to govern the ruled. It seems this is what the parallel can be drawn with John Locke's political philosophy of his consent of the government when the rights are being consented to the government. And he further talked about like it's the government's bond and duty to take protection of or to protect the interest of the public at any cost. For the very simple reason, the social contract was formed and established by the two parties for the very reason that the rights of the public, the interest of the public, and the welfare of the society as a whole will be taken into consideration come what may. Dear friends, from John Locke's perspective, his defense of the right of revolution, he went to the extent of asking people to go for revolution in case their rights and missions are being thwarted of that time. But needless to add, when the democracy everywhere in the world is based on majority and majority rule, it was John Locke also defended the principle of majority. And he also defended executive powers from the separation of legislative powers. He did not put both the two, executive powers and legislative powers, together. He formulated a different perspective. Dear friends, when we talk about further about like his discussions, his write-ups, we find Locke denied that there is a need to have coercion to bring people to down the table, and churches should have any coercive power over their members. So far this perception, so far this incarnation, so far this description appears to be in the letter concerning toleration. So from John Locke's point of view, toleration did play a very important role, something which cannot be denied. Dear friends, Locke was very intelligent. He understood the ways and means, the prevailing situations of that time, as to how the public are passing through, as to how the public's nature and views could be taken into consideration, and how best desires, missions, and visions of public needed to be defended. No government, come what may, can really thwart the noble cause of the public. If the social contract is there, that speaks volumes about the responsibilities and accountabilities of the regime to look after the better parts of the cross sections of the society. This what like this is being painted by John Locke, which further gets in his political writings, like third letter on toleration or the second letter on toleration. He talks about, in his political writings, as we know, he was a voracious writer, he was a prolific writer, and he wrote on the current situations of that time that was so essential. Dear friends, he could talk on a variety of issues. Not only could be the toleration part, or separation of powers, or dissolution of government for right or wrong reasons whenever there is need of that, and talking about the separation of powers, that is so essential for any government not to mix with religion or churches, as it used to happen. The dominance factor of churches used to be seen at that point of time across the world, in many parts of the world, if not everywhere. Dear friends, also he talked about like punishment and various categories of it, which we will see in due course of time, and then political obligation, consent, and the ends of different regimes. And further he discussed about various components of the state of nature, property. But now, dear friends, we are going to discuss on an issue that's so important and very essential, and that's about natural rights, natural law. It is said about John Locke's political philosophy that his theory of natural law and natural rights are very, very important perspective for the generations to come to follow, or even the contemporary of that time to understand it. Dear viewers, here is a catch. In this video, what we are discussing, we are giving you much in details. We are not giving you only points wise. Here, what we are giving you, everything in detail so that in understanding it can be useful, and the question in what capacity is being asked, be it for UPSC mains or PCS mains, UGC NET JRF, or even for college or university students. From that all perspective, this will be quite useful and beneficial. Those who want to understand John Locke's under Western political thought will be quite useful. Dear friends, now we are talking about natural laws and natural rights of John Locke. And when it talks about natural law, definitely it's not like just now it used to prevail. Basically, it existed long before even Locke talked about this views, thoughts, ideas. Already moral truths were being discussed. Already moral truths were being applied to different parts of the society, and not only here of that time, but also right across many countries wherever it was possible. Dear friends, regardless of particular place anybody lived or agreements done, any society cannot work without the absence of a solid law prevailing to regulate the society. Dear friends, laws are meant for the protection of right regions so that society can have an abiding society, not the lawlessness, chaos, and anarchy which no regime of the world can tolerate, neither is in the interest of any public of any society. And same was the case with John Locke. Dear friends, laws, it is said, that is also part of nature and generally applicable through conventional operations, and laws could have been applied where the government was politically legitimate, where the government was being sanctioned and accepted by the people with the consent, where the society was really able to see what actually is the government talking about, or where the law really is pervasive and useful. Dear friends, as you know, laws are applicable only when the environment is conducive and useful. And when we talk about like natural law, definitely this natural law happens to be different from the divine law. Let us not forget, let us not confuse the different perception of natural law and divine law. Dear friends, when we talk about like divine law, that refers to a process on the basis of which laws, degrees are in the form of incarnation, and the words are of divine, that need to be followed by the followers of those divine law, and it cannot be disobeyed, while the same cannot be said to be applied with natural law. And this is definitely different from divine law. When we talk about of that time, Generally, it refers to the meaning of Christian tradition and referred to those laws that God had in one or other form revealed, and that was possible through the help of any particular prophet, as it always happens in any part of society. Earlier, any revelations of God used to take place through the means of prophet to the society, to the humanity, and that was God's will which was being revealed, and corresponding to that, God's wills and desires needed to be followed. But same was not the case, dear friends, regarding natural law. Natural law basically is the product of covenant, traditions, values, cultures since time immemorial for any society, for any country to follow. And that is the culmination of the reflection of the entire demography prevailing of a particular territory where that natural law is being applied. Dear friends, even century before Locke, when we talk about like natural rights, already that were in the process and being talked about. It's not that only came across or could be seen just in the form of Locke's write-up. Rather, it could have been seen even in the writings of many thinkers earlier, like Pufendorf Pufendorf, and then Hobbes and Grotius could also be mentioned in this connection, who talked about natural rights. Therefore, it's not that only now John Locke talks about this and then nobody had talked about earlier. It's not like this. Dear friends, from exams point of view, natural law and natural rights are very, very essential factors which can creep, or which generally this particular topic comes in the exams. So from that perspective, it could be quite congenial to understand. In addition to this, natural law basically talks about natural rights, duties, and then privileges or claims which an individual of any society can really claim of, and they are further entitled to. But the point is, there are many commentators that talk about like there could be considerable disagreement as to how different components and factors can be understood so easily. So they need to be understood vis-a-vis others in Locke's theory and doctrine. Dear friend, for anyone to understand any new thing requires study, because that becomes a way to understand new things. If we talk about like Leo Strauss and many of his followers, then definitely rights were something very important, and from this perspective also Locke's position was very, very important, and also could have been drawn a parallel between John Locke and Thomas Hobbes. Dear friends, it is also a point of discussion from many commentators' point of view that Locke talked about hedonistic theory of human motivation from his essay 2, and there were talks about the agreement with Hobbes which could have been identical in views of human beings and self-interest nature of the society's demography. Dear friends, John Locke really gave tremendous emphasis on natural obligations, and it was where the situation was right, where the conducive factors were prevalent, and the situation was not in conflict with other factors, as rights and duties are very essential component needed to be protected by any regime. If we talk about like social contract, or which Thomas Hobbes talked Leviathan, in both the cases, in commonwealth or social contract, the important part is one party has to shun rights to the other party, and other party is obliged to follow the rules and regulations established by the former party. So in this sense, John Locke talks about, if there is the prevalence of natural law, then the government of the day or the regime of the day essentially takes a view on the basis of which the positions, the rights, the understandings, and then traditions, cultures, everything of the public who had surrendered their rights needed to be protected. And in no way that can be violated. And for these interpretations, more scholars try to talk about and try to draw a parallel with the views of Ashcraft, Tooley, and Dunn so far natural law is concerned. Dear friends, most of the scholars of that time, they held the perception that Locke emphasized regarding the rights, liberty, life, and property. They were very much clear about John Locke, the duties we have towards different people, that there should be the prevalence of law and order in a society. That's so essential. It's bounden duty of everybody not to harm to others, not to downgrade others, not to belittle others. Rather, it talks about if we are pretty sure to take care about ourselves, so is the case with others. Others' interests are also very essential to be taken care of. Dear friends, most scholars definitely would agree that John Locke tried to derive a general duty for the preservation of humanity. He also talked that's very essential, and that is also relevant in today's world, and I'm pretty sure it will be relevant for all and for the entire future. In a sense, he talks about, if some portions or some segments of the society are deprived of properties or starving, it's the bounden duty of the rest of the humanity to take care or shed some portions of their property or monetary terms to the rest of the public who are under deprivation, so that they also can have the rights to survive and to have livelihood. Dear friends, in a sense, it talks about a duty of charity, because that section of the society which cannot procure their subsistence, it's very essential of the public whatever can do should be done. Of course, beyond public's empathy, there is also requirement of something to be done on the part of the regime of that country that is so essential. Dear friends, it was talked in the write-up of two treatises, which is so essential, when John Locke talked about under the very concept of natural law. Dear friends, you can say there have been many attempts and understandings of different interpretations what John Locke talked about, like Michael Ducat's viewpoints of the Straussian position that really underlines about the distinctions between Locke and Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes, on a different perspective. Dear friends, if we talk about like Ducat, he talks about like John Locke's theism and tries to paint a position that talks about grounds of property rights and human beings themselves. It was not from Thomas Hobbes' perspective, who did not really watch for which John Locke talks about in different tracts. Dear friends, Locke's theory of natural law was good, was brilliant depiction of the society which was needed. However, there were some scholars who slightly had different perceptions from the perspective of Peter Laslet and Strasbourg. In addition to this, concerning human understanding and essay, when we talk about John Locke, he tries to defend a theory of moral understanding and knowledge, which definitely negates the possibility of innate ideas, and his claims and counterclaims about the morality which is capable of exhibiting in the society, and all this he talks in his second treatise, and also of the reasonableness of Christianity. Dear friends, regarding the talks and perceptions about natural law and the natural rights of John Locke, there are and there had been many different opinions and scholars who try to infer from him, and also contradictions came. So it was basically John Locke who defended and believed in natural law. It was something which was essential from that perspective, which used to prevail at the society which was not very matured, according to John Locke. Dear friends, though there are many contradictions, like Laslet who talks about, he tries to see John Locke from the perspective of two different angles. From one angle, he talks about like Locke should be seen as a political writer, and Locke should be seen as a political philosopher, and that should be a different approach, something which cannot be mixed. Dear friends, in due course of time, with abundant scholars rejecting this position like Tuckness, Simons, Ashcraft Grant, Yolton and Coleman. They somehow, in one or other form, agree with Lockean viewpoint regarding natural law, and they talked about. They said there is nothing inconsistent when we talk about contradictions in his natural law. He says, and they all agree in Locke's admission. So far, reasonableness of Christianity right up is concerned and thoughts and ideas what John Locke talked about. Dear friends, two treatises were very decisive mega write-up which John Locke had written. If we talk about Thomas Hobbes, his masterpiece was Leviathan, which he portrayed a big perception about the society and the country. And also talked about the regime, what regime should do and how regime should be done. In the same fashion, John Locke had different perceptions about the society, his vision, mission, and revelations what he saw. If we try to understand about Locke's position on the ground of natural law, then it must be taken a position with a longer and larger debate regarding the interpretation of natural law theory, and which definitely can be said that predates about, so far John Locke is concerned with the interpretation of voluntarism intellectualism or voluntarist rationalist discussions, dialogue and debates in that connection. In the most simple word, if we talk about regarding voluntarist, that announces and talks about the right and wrong, something determination of God and the will of God, that is so essential to be followed, because wills of God needed to be obliged at all cost, because God is the custodian of the entire universe, from everything to everything. From John Locke's perspective, when we talk about the revelations and incarnations of God, dear friends, this is how many interpretations and counter interpretations about the revelations of God, churches, states, rulings, governance, natural rights, natural law. This all find pretty places and reflections in the talks what exactly John Locke talked about. Dear friends, it's essential to use rational thought to understand and try to dissect in multi-perspective way, which then means to understand about John Locke's natural right and natural law. More than that, if we try to see of a state of nature of John Locke, at the very first glance it appears quite simple, and Locke talks about a common judge and authority when we talk about a state of nature. As we see, Thomas Hobbes painted quite differently the state of nature or human nature at that point of time. And all persons in a state of nature were against all, and they were having tremendous problems which under Leviathan we tried to find what exactly Thomas Hobbes talked about. But same cannot be said. What we discussed right now, dear friends, under this video, do you think who is harder regarding the surrendering of rights to the authority or commonwealth? Is it Thomas Hobbes or is it John Locke? Don't we find the much similarities of the write-ups of John Locke with the what we are coming across right across the world in contemporary political discourse? Many similarities between his rights he talked about and the rights of what people enjoy now around the world. At least some fractions of that are very similar, if not majority of them. Dear friends, under state of nature, what we talk about John Locke, he says, man basically living according to reason and logical truth common superior, and whatever nature could be, but the region logic and understanding was always pervasive. And precisely on that account, John Locke did not paint the society as what was being painted by Thomas Hobbes, that everybody is fighting against everybody and everyone is against everyone. All is at war with all. At least this is not the picture of what is being painted, what is being discussed and talked about by John Locke. Dear friends, his very famous write-up, that is two treatises, many scholars tried to talk about and tried to give commentaries on two treatises, that the state of nature exists like the situation of Thomas Hobbes, where there is no existence of legitimate political authority. If that lacks in the society, then nobody will be safe. It is something which tantamounts to what we call lawlessness, anarchy, or stateless. Wherever in the world is there, definitely there will be dilapidation of the regime, and the regime will not be in a position to act as is needed to be acted by the covenant of the treaties of the constitution of that country. Dear friends, it was something which John Locke talked about, and that was very essential and legitimate. If the government is not politically legitimate, then how can you expect that the government will be able to justify his actions vis-a-vis to the society? Dear friends, then John Locke talks about the disputes, and that disputes which could arise in the absence of the legitimate political authority, and which can lead to the anarchic situations anywhere in the country. Dear friends, a state of nature definitely could be different from or could be distinct from political society. In a political society, always there is an existence of a legitimate government. But the same views cannot be painted and drawn regarding the state of war where everybody fails, everything fails, and man of that society finds no reason why to abide the law of region or the existence of any legitimate government which could take care the legitimate cause of the public. Dear friends, it's quite plausible what the picture being painted by John Locke. If you talk about like another commentator regarding salmon, he talks about important challenges and he has unnecessary conditions to discuss, to support, not to support. The pervasive conditions which John Locke talked about. But two individuals might be able, in the state of nature, to find a third party which can take care about the settling of the disputes between them, and without leaving the state of nature. Definitely, in the absence of third party, which is so essential to solve the disputes cannot be solved unless an amicable force should be there. Dear friends, so claims and counter claims about the interpretation about the account where people can live in a state of war in a different track than the states with the legitimate governments. Dear friends, under state of nature with the state of legitimate government, it's quite possible the society can really work properly at the right perspective, and there could be no danger of falling the regime in different directions. Dear friends, in this video what I'm talking about right now is about the interpretation of different thoughts, introductory ideas, philosophy, natural rights, natural law, state of nature of John Locke. Dear friends, further John Locke talks about the nature is a relational concept, and that's based on a set of moral relations, and that is so essential when there is a description of a particular geographical territory. A moral relations are very important for human beings to connect with each other and trying to find out the right regions which can prevail and then can thwart the state of nature as a state of war. Dear friends, from Lockean's perspective about the state of nature is much more about the moral rights and responsibilities that are so essential existing for the people, and the public who have consented to the adjudication of their disputes, then the legitimate government can play decisive role or the authority to solve any conflict if arises for the party which has surrendered entire rights to the commonwealth, here the government. Therefore, dear friends, under the social contract theory, under the political legitimate government, the public had once submitted the rights, no choices. In normal course of actions, if the government is doing as was decided and as was being asked, then it was essential to follow what should be the right perspective to follow. Dear friends, therefore, Lockean perspective of a state of nature, we can talk about, it relates and talks about moral rights that is very essential for the society to flourish and to move on. In this sense, state of nature is much better described by John Locke than was described by Thomas Hobbes. Dear friends, if we talk about like from the perspective of Simons, since the state of nature is a moral account, then definitely it must be moving in the direction of without contradictions, and also same views of John Donne regarding the relationship between Locke's state of nature and his practices and understanding of Christianity or Christians' beliefs also have tremendous ideas which need to be focused and discussed. Dear friends, Locke's theory of state of nature is also very much closely underwatched and discussed regarding the theory of natural law. And it is the natural law that takes care of the rights of persons and their status, which play a significant role in interpreting the consent, the vision and mission, the rights and thoughts. All these need to be taken by the governor or the rule of the state, what John Locke talks about in the state of nature. Dear friends, so be it like IS men's exams of WPT of 22 or PSIR, or be it PCS 2022, or be the UGC NET JRF set SLET of 21 or 22, or be they for the exams of college and universities, it's very essential what things can be taken out from this particular video is you can have elaborative views of thoughts of John Locke. It is the initial ideas which I discussed here in this part 1 of this video, and then soon it will follow by the remaining parts, second or third, that will finish, that will give entire political philosophy and political thought of John Locke according to the exams which are being asked. And I'm pretty sure if you go through the entire video of this and try to understand, it will be much more beneficial for you, and that could be quite helpful. Thanks dear friends in this connection after I discussed in this video about John Locke. And if you like this video and you found informative, do share, like and subscribe if it's informative for you all. Thanks for watching the video.